Good morning, guys. This morning we'll be looking at the credit card payments for financial maths in the general HSC course. There's a few things that are important to remember when looking at credit cards. Number one, I think the interest rate is probably one of the trickiest aspects of this. Not really tricky, but we often forget a few things. So, if we're looking at an interest rate, let's say a nice easy one of 5% per annum. Now, if we want that as a decimal per annum, we should know it's simply either 5 over 100, or if we put it as a decimal, 0.05. Now that's per annum. If I looked at an interest rate of 0.5% per annum, now to put that as a decimal, again, it's exactly the same, 0.5 over 100, or if we put that as a decimal, 0.005. Now the reason I bring this up is that a lot of times when people see the 0.5% and they want to write as a decimal, they simply write down 0.5 because they think, well, that's a decimal. They haven't realized that is still a percentage. In order to put that into a percentage, so a percentage into a decimal, we need to either divide by 100, as you can see there, or leave it as a fraction. I will say these are the preferred units when dealing with credit cards as a decimal. Sometimes if we leave it over 100, it can get quite tricky. Also remembering that with interest rates in your credit cards, it is more common for your credit cards to be charged interest per day. So occasionally, if they gave us an interest rate of 5% per annum, and we're asked to put that as a daily rate, okay, we'd be doing our 0.05 over 365 days. Okay, now you can probably see that's why I prefer to have the decimal. If I had the fraction, it'd be 5 over 100, and then putting that over 365, and that would look quite messy, and most likely we get a little bit lost there. So first of all, always write it as a decimal. Second of all, ensure the period is correct. Now you'll see in a few questions to follow that often they will give you the interest rate already converted per day, like 0.5% per day. So you probably won't have to change that, but you will have to make sure that it is a decimal. The other important thing to note with our credit cards is our N, I guess, or the amount of days that interest is being charged. So we'll say the time frame or the time period. Again, as you'll see with some of the questions that I'll put up here, they'll say, I purchased a bike and on my credit card, and I paid the amount off 20 days later, or they might give you a date. So let's say for example, January the 1st I bought it, and then I paid the account on January the 27th. So counting how many days it's been charged for is important. Most times you'll see on the questions they'll say that the interest rate has been charged from the day purchased, and including the day purchased up until the day that you actually pay it off. So in this case, you would count the 1st and you would count the 27th, okay, which would give you a total of about 27 days. Occasionally we forget to count that very first day, which can give us an incorrect time period. But again, you'll see on the questions to follow how that sort of works out. Okay. All right. So let's have a look at a particular question. Okay, the first one, multiple choice question. In July, Mrs. Allott received a statement for her credit card account. The account has no interest-free period. Simple interest is calculated and charged to her account on the statement date. Okay, so a couple of things in this that is important. That bit is exceptionally important. your credit card interest rates can be charged either using simple interest or compound interest. Okay, it's very important. If they don't mention simple interest, then it will be compound interest in this particular case. But this question, as you can see, mentions that it's simple interest. It also says that it has no interest-free periods, which means that the interest will be charged on the very first day that I purchase it. This down here is again another important part. Interest is charged on amounts from and including the date of purchase up to and including the statement date. So when I first purchased it, which you can see here, I purchased it on the 29th of June, so interest will be charged on that day as well as a statement date when I'm paying it. Interest will also be charged on that day as well. So first of all, how do we start this question? Well, we know it's simple interest, so interest equals P times R times N. Now looking at here, we have a previous balance of $529.46 and we had payments of $529.46. So that means that I previously owed that amount, but I paid it off. So I have no outstanding amounts. So realistically, that information there is absolutely useless to us. The purchases is important because that is our p-value, $1,721.50. Okay, now my interest rate is the next important part. So my interest rate says a daily percentage rate of 0.0521%. Notice that is not a decimal, that is a percent. If I want to put that as a decimal, I have to put 0.0521 and I need to then divide that by 100. So that's one of the first things where people can make sort of mistakes. So hopefully you might know it's going to be 0.00 if I divide by 100 and then 0.521, and then I need to times it by my n, which is again probably the second hardest bit. So the first hard bit was probably doing your interest rate. So the next bit is figuring out how many days. So we know from the 29th of June, okay, so 29th of June, and we're going to go all up to the 23rd of July. So how many days are there in June? 30 days, half September, April, June, and November. So there are only 29 days in June. So for June, we've got 2 days counting. We've got the 29th and the 30th. So that's 2 days. Plus, I've got 23 days here for July. So that gives me a total of 25 days. So 25 days. So now what I need to do, and then multiply it all out, so which gives me $22.42. So that amount becomes the interest charged. Now I need to make sure what the question's asking me. So it says, what is the minimum payment due on this account? Well, the minimum payment is either $25 or 5% of the closing balance, whichever is the larger. So we need to figure out what the closing balance is going to be. The closing balance obviously isn't the $22.42. Okay, the closing balance would be the interest added on top of what we started with, which was my $1,721.50. So if we add those two things together, we get 1743.92. I need to find 5% of that. So either times it by 5 over 100 or times it by 0.05. That will give me 5%, which gives me a total answer there of $87.20. So because that is bigger than the $25, that then becomes my minimum monthly payment, which you can see in this question is the answer to D. Okay, so again with that question, the tricky parts first of all was writing your interest rate as a decimal, so dividing it by 100, and then finding what your N is going to be. Okay, in this case it's 25 days, and then there was a little bit added extra because I had to add it to my purchases to find my closing balance, and then I ended up having to find 5%. But again, the two hardest parts circled there in green are going to be quite common with most of your questions. Okay, let's have a look at another question, another multiple choice. Notice in HSC a lot of these questions are multiple choice questions. A television was purchased for $2,100 on 12th of April 2011 using a credit card. Simple interest was charged. Simple interest was charged. Another simple interest question. At a rate of 19.74% per annum for purchases on this credit card. There were no other purchases on this credit card account. There was no interest-free period, which means automatically interest was charged from the very first day. The period for which interest was charged included the date of purchase and the date of payment. So again, you can see that this question tells me that I'm going to be adding the first day all the way up until including the last day. What amount was paid when the account was paid in full? Okay, like the last question, we know that it's simple interest, so I equals PRN. We know that the principal amount is $2,100. Okay, that's my purchase. My interest rate. Now, I'm going to have to calculate this one out because we know we've got 19.74%. Okay. So that's going to be 0.1974 as a decimal. But then I need to then divide it by 365 because at the moment that is a per annum amount. A per annum, so that's a per year amount. So what we want it to have it as a daily amount, so then we can times it by how many days that we've been charged interest for. So if I do that and divide by 365 days, we're going to get something like this, 0.0005408. Now you don't have to put that many decimals. Probably 54 would be sufficient there, but I have put those last ones in just to make sure. So 0.123454. I'm just going to put the 54 there. Now that's the first tricky bit. The second tricky bit is to work out the days. Okay, the days. So let's have a quick look at here. It says the 12th of April, and then we're paying it all the way up into the 20th of May. So again, I need to figure out how many days are in April. 30 days, half September, April, June, and November. Okay, there are only 30 days. 30 days in April. So we've got the 12th. So now I have to count from 12th all the way up to 30. So 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Okay, which gives me a total of 19 days in total. Okay, that's for up until May, and then I've got the 20 days of May that we've got there. So if I add those together, we've got a total of 39 days. 39 days. Alrighty. So I can now chuck my 39 into that first bit. Now it says what amount was paid when the account was paid in full. Well, so that means I have to figure out first of all what my interest is going to be. Then I'm going to add on that interest to the original amount that I borrowed. Okay, and that will give me my answer. So the interest is going to be, if I do that in my calculator, $44.22. 23 cents, should I say. I'm now going to add that on to the original $2,100 to give my final answer of 2144.23. Now you might say, hold on, that answer isn't there, so I must have got it wrong. The only reason mine's different, it should be C, and I apologize for that, is that when I rounded this number up, I said it shouldn't make much of a difference. In that case, you can. Remember, I have said in previous lessons that you should always keep the value in your calculator and not round up until the end. I was just using my my iPhone, so unfortunately, so I wasn't able to do that. But if you do that properly, as I said, you leave that the actual amount, this amount, in your calculator, and use that as your interest rate. It will come out to be the correct answer of 2144.29. Alrighty, one more question, guys. One more question. Okay. In June, Ms. Big Spender received a statement for her credit card account. The account has no interest-free period. Simple interest is calculated. We'll look at that. None of my questions that I've chosen have got compound interest. That's funny enough. Okay, but simple interest is calculated and her charge to account on the statement date. Note, interest is charged on amounts from and including. Okay, we've seen that again. It's all too similar. So, two things we need to find. We need to make sure we know what our rate's going to be. We need to figure out what our end's going to be. They're the two parts. Alright, and then once we've done that, we can chuck it into I equals PRN. So what's our interest rate? We want a daily rate. It's given us a daily percentage rate of 0.00, because we want to divide by 100, and then we've got 0.498. Okay, again, all I did is I put that decimal and I divided it by 100, because remember, that's percentage, not as a decimal. My N, okay, so we need to figure out it's the 23rd, I'll put down here, the 23rd of May, and we're going to pay it off on the 20th of June, 30 days, half September, April, June, and November. Okay, there are 31 days in May. So 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st. So that brings up to have 9 days in May, plus my 20 days in June, which gives me an N value of 29. Okay, pretty much nearly there. So simply put that into my formula. My P is $263.83. I'm going to multiply that by my 0.000498, and then I'm going to times it by 29 days. So all I now need to do is just simply enter that into my calculator, and it will come up with the answer. Now just notice I just did change, so I apologize. The purchase amount was $617.72. I put that 263 in by accident, so my apologies. But we come out with an interest amount of $8.92. We're going to add that on to my $617.72, because that will give me then the amount that is withstanding. Let's type that into my calculator. So we get the total amount of $626.64, and that gets me to calculate the interest charged to her account. Now, what has the question asked me for? So I probably should look at the beginning part. For how many days has she charged interest on the purchase? We've already got that at 29 days, correct? And calculate the interest charged to her account, well, just the $8.92. So $8.92. Okay, so each time you do a question like this, even though you can see that I just ran off and just did the same calculations, just make sure you're answering the question, because sometimes, like you can see there, I went off on a tangent, got all the information what I usually need to get, but then I just need to make sure which parts of the questions are asking me for. In this case, it wanted to know about the days, which you've got there, and the actual interest charge, not the total amount. Okay, that is credit cards. Remember, the two most important things are going to be finding your interest rate as a decimal, really important. Okay, so make sure you divide your interest rate by 100 if it's given to you as a percentage. And the second thing is finding your end value, so how many days you're being charged your interest for, making sure that you count it most of the time, as you can see here for all these questions, from the day that you've purchased it up until the day that you actually paid it off, and including both of those. Alright, I hope this made a bit of sense to you and this was useful for you. Use a bit of a blue screen this time. I'm going to try to start mixing things up a bit. Any other questions, if things weren't clear, please let me know, and I can try to make them a little bit clearer for you. Have a great day, guys.